Don't cry, mister. You can borrow my mom, said the little boy to the CEO sitting alone at the park. The bench was cold, but Marcus Holloway barely noticed. His tailored suit, which had cost more than most people's monthly rent, hung loosely on his shoulders as he sat hunched forward, face buried in his hands. The tears came silently at first, then with shaking shoulders that betrayed the careful control he'd maintained for 43 years. Around him, the park bustled with afternoon life, joggers, dog walkers, young families, but Marcus existed in a vacuum of grief so profound that the world seemed to move in slow motion, muted and distant. He didn't hear the small footsteps approaching. Didn't notice the shadow that fell across his expensive leather shoes. It was only when a tiny hand touched his knee that Marcus looked up, his red-rimmed eyes meeting the concerned gaze of a boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Don't cry, mister, the child said, his voice carrying that particular earnestness only children possess. You can borrow my mom. Marcus blinked, confusion momentarily piercing through his anguish. The boy stood before him in grass-stained jeans and a superhero t-shirt, holding a half-eaten popsicle in one hand. His sneakers were scuffed, his hair needed cutting, and his brown eyes shone with a compassion that seemed far too ancient for such a young face. What? Marcus managed, his voice hoarse. My mom, the boy repeated patiently, as if explaining something obvious. When I'm sad, my mom makes it better. You look really sad, so you can borrow her. She's good at fixing sad. Before Marcus could respond, a woman hurried over, slightly out of breath. Tommy, I told you not to bother people. She looked at Marcus apologetically, noting his expensive suit and the tears on his face. I'm so sorry, sir. Come on, sweetie, leave the man alone. But mom, he's crying, Tommy protested, not budging. We can't just leave him crying. You always say we should help people who are hurting. The woman, Sarah, Marcus would later learn, met his eyes with an embarrassed smile that faded into concern. Up close, Marcus could see the weariness in her face, the kind that came from working long hours and raising a child alone. Her nurse's scrubs were visible beneath her jacket, and her hands had the dry, chapped look of someone who washed them dozens of times a day. It's okay, Marcus heard himself say, surprising even himself. He's fine. Sarah hesitated, clearly torn between giving him privacy and her son's stubborn insistence on helping. Tommy made the decision for her by climbing onto the bench beside Marcus, his small presence somehow both intrusive and comforting. Did somebody die? Tommy asked with the blunt directness of childhood. Is that why you're crying? Tommy. Sarah gasped, but Marcus shook his head. Yes, he whispered. My mother. This morning. The simple admission broke something inside him, and fresh tears spilled over. He'd been in a board meeting when the call came. Had left immediately, catching his private jet, but he'd been too late. Too late by 3 hours. 3 hours that had been consumed by presentations and profit margins while his mother took her last breaths alone in a hospice bed, asking nurses if her son was coming. Tommy processed this information seriously, then scooted closer and patted Marcus's arm. That's really sad. My grandpa died last year. I was sad for a really long time. He thought for a moment. I'm still sad sometimes. Is it okay if I sit with you? Something in Marcus's chest cracked open. This child, this stranger, was offering him something no one else had in years, simple, uncomplicated human presence without agenda or judgment. He nodded, unable to speak. Sarah sat down on Marcus's other side, maintaining a respectful distance but present. They sat in silence for a while, 3 people on a park bench, watching the world continue its indifferent rotation. Do you have any good stories about her? Tommy asked eventually. About your mom. My mom says that when we tell stories about people who died, it's like they're still a little bit alive. Marcus found himself talking about how his mother had raised him alone after his father left, working 3 jobs to put him through school. How she'd believed in him when no one else did, how she'd sacrificed everything so he could have opportunities she'd never had. How he'd promised to take care of her, to give her the life she deserved once he made it. And he had made it. Built a tech empire worth billions, became one of the youngest CEOs in Silicon Valley. But somewhere along the way, the calls to his mother became less frequent. The visits farther apart. He was always too busy, always had another meeting, another deal, another acquisition. He'd bought her a beautiful house, hired help, sent money, but what he hadn't sent was himself. Last month, she asked me to come for Sunday dinner, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I told her I couldn't. I had a conference call with Tokyo. It couldn't be rescheduled, I said. He laughed bitterly. As if any call was more important than sitting across a table from her, hearing about her day, just being there. Tommy listened with the seriousness of a judge. When Marcus finished, the boy was quiet for a moment, then said, "My dad doesn't come see me anymore either. He's busy too. Mom says sometimes grown-ups forget what's important when they're trying to do important things. It's kind of confusing." Sarah's hand found her son's shoulder, her eyes glistening. Marcus looked at her, really looked, and saw a woman who probably worked herself to exhaustion to provide for her child, who probably went without so he could have, who probably knew exactly what it meant to sacrifice and struggle and keep going anyway. "I'm sorry," Marcus said to Tommy. "Your dad is missing out on knowing a pretty remarkable kid." Tommy beamed at him, then his expression turned thoughtful. "You know what my mom does when I'm really sad? She makes hot chocolate and we look at pictures and tell happy stories. Do you have pictures of your mom?" Marcus pulled out his phone with trembling hands. He hadn't looked at photos in months, maybe years. But there they were, his mother's face, smiling at the camera in the garden of the house he'd bought her, a house too big for one person, where she'd lived mostly alone while he conquered the business world. Tommy leaned in, and Sarah did too, and together they looked through the pictures. Marcus found himself telling stories he'd forgotten he remembered, his mother teaching him to ride a bike, her terrible singing while she cooked, the way she'd always saved him the last cookie. With each story, the vice around his chest loosened slightly. An hour passed, then two. Other park goers came and went. The sun shifted in the sky. And on that bench, a CEO who'd forgotten how to be human, a single mother who worked herself to the bone, and a 7-year-old boy with a superhero t-shirt created a small pocket of grace in an often graceless world. When it was time to go, Tommy hugged Marcus tightly. "I'm sorry about your mom," he said. "But I think she probably knew you loved her. Moms can tell these things." Sarah wrote her number on a scrap of paper. "If you need someone to talk to," she said simply. "Sometimes it helps." Marcus watched them walk away, Tommy's hand in his mother's, and felt something shift fundamentally inside him. He looked at his phone, at the endless stream of emails and messages demanding his attention, and for the first time in decades, none of it seemed urgent. 3 months later, the tech world buzzed with news that Marcus Holloway was stepping back from day-to-day operations, restructuring his company to prioritize work-life balance, and launching a foundation in his mother's name to support single parents. Those close to the story wondered what had caused such a dramatic change. But Marcus knew. It had been a little boy in a park, offering to loan out his most precious resource because someone was crying. It had been kindness without calculation, compassion without condition. It had been a reminder that the most important meetings happen on benches, not in boardrooms, and the most valuable currency isn't money, it's time, presence, and the simple grace of human connection. And every Sunday, without fail, Marcus had dinner with Sarah and Tommy. Because he'd learned, finally, that the only truly urgent business in life is showing up for the people who matter, before it's too late.